Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Marketing Corner. This is episode 8, where we're going to be covering tracking and the future of marketing based on all these tracking changes that are coming into effect. So, Casper, you want to talk to me a little bit about some of these changes and what they are?
Definitely. Everyone who's been involved in marketing recently, especially marketing in general, but digital marketing, right, is aware that there's a lot of stuff happening. We've had not too recently, we had the ITP as well, which was like probably one of the first real heavy hitters. And then you have recently you had the new iPhone update or Apple update, iOS 14, right, which is the real killer, so to speak. But we'll get into that. I think personally, I think we need to make a disclaimer before we start this episode. While I am I'm a pretty technical guy, and Jen also knows quite a bit. We're not necessarily cookie tracking experts, right? So if we say anything on this episode that might be a little off, then that's why.
Yeah, I think it's important to say this is our understanding of it. This is what we're seeing in our day-to-day as B2B marketers. But obviously, everyone do your own research to figure out how this is going to impact you and your digital behavior and in your advertising. Yes. I think one of the things I want to kind of address in the beginning is, I was reading a lot about the Apple, particularly iOS changes, and Google are going to be rolling out something very similar actually in 2022.
Yes.
And when you look at these changes on the surface, they're very much making it about they're doing this for the consumer. This is to protect your data. This is to protect your privacy. Please don't sue me, Apple, but I'm going to call BS on the truly altruistic, we're doing this for you. I see this as a way of Apple eliminating their competition because they are also offering their own advertising solution in Apple.
Yeah.
They are not necessarily protecting you as much as you think they are. Just because you can opt out of being tracked, they are only opting you out of third-party data. Yeah. First-party data is still on the table, and that's good news for marketers. But I just think it's important to, dispel this myth that it's like we're doing this to protect you. They're doing it
complete horseshit. Let's be real. Like
you said it.
Yeah, it's really. Don't get me wrong. Someone in branding communication thought, hey, we can spin this a positive way. And maybe there are probably some people in Apple who actually believe that this is they're doing it for the right reasons. And the thing is, like when I look at all these things, I'm like, from a marketing perspective, from a work life, Casper, I like everyone else, I hate it, and I'm not a big fan. But from a personal perspective, there's a lot of benefits. Like I actually, when I've been asked recently, I've actually also said a bit no to tracking. To a few things, like Spotify asked, "Hey, can I track your data?" I'm like, "Fuck you, Spotify."
No, why? Yeah.
So there is a lot of positives. So let's do it. What my biggest concern will always be from from what people don't realize if you're not in marketing is that this actually makes the ads you get way worse. So today you actually get personalized ads somewhat, and they miss the mark quite a bit, but at least you get ads that are in your interest field, like. I can easily, so I don't care too much about makeup and stuff like that, but maybe that's the wrong example. But let's use soccer. I don't care about sports, soccer. So maybe because they can't track me anymore, they say, hey, I'm a male, I'm 30 years old, then I'm going to get soccer ads. And I'm like, but that's not who I am. Like, I'm in marketing, I'm a nerd, I like World of Warcraft, I like all that stuff, right? Like, So from a consumer perspective, like I think what a lot of people don't realize is this is actually not that good. Like it's not only, it has some benefits, absolutely, but it's definitely, you're going to get a lot more clutter, and that's actually bad.
I think that's a really great point. Like this isn't stopping ads.
No.
Ads will never go away.
Still exist. Yeah.
They're just stopping tracking your behavior to give you ads that they think you would find interesting. And I think it's also interesting that Facebook did this kind of counter campaign. They actually took out ads in like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, hard copy paper.
Yeah, I remember. I saw them. Yeah.
Yeah, and to say that this is going to really impact small businesses. And I think actually in a way I'm somewhat in agreement with that, because smaller businesses, you put a cookie on, you put a pixel on, and you let that do its job, and then you focus
Yeah,
on other things. So I think that's, and we'll get into the kind of ins and outs of what this actually means. But just to say, yeah, I think I don't totally disagree with that, but I think particularly Facebook, data is their bread and butter.
mm,
Apple's bread and butter is their hardware. That's where they're making their revenue. So they're not as bothered about losing this data as much as Google and Facebook are. And so they're also having their own spin on how, but by doing this, you're impacting the small business. Ugh, so everyone's kind of lying a little bit. Everyone's
yeah,
spinning.
of course they are. They're making
But
trillions, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Uh,
So, Casper, do you want to talk a little bit about, let's talk about that kind of nuts and bolts. Like, what does this actually
yes.
mean? What's impacted in
Well,
plain language?
essentially, like the newest update on iOS 14, essentially what you get is when you enter Facebook or any other app that's tracking your data, if you're using an iPhone, like an Apple phone, right? Like you get an opt in or opt out that says, "Hey, do you want to be tracked?" And if you say no to that one, then they suddenly can't track your data anymore. That's simple. And that of course makes it really hard to do performance based marketing, because like you especially, and it's especially hurtful for Facebook, because you can say Google is not as easily impacted, like not in the same way, because like it goes through your browser and your search, and so it's not the same way where it doesn't track data in the same way, but it's hurting a little bit, but it's mostly Facebook and LinkedIn to an extent, Twitter, those types of channels
Mhm.
that are really hurting by this. So essentially, all third party cookies are also like gone, and at the same time from ITP, right? So you're stuck in a between a rock and a hard place where it's getting really hard to track things. Um, when it gets back, like I think there's a so third party cookies now, like that was because of ITP, right? They only stay for a day.
Mhm.
So we already knew that was already pretty bad, and now when you don't have any tracking, it literally goes away. So there's literally accounts, and this is especially impactful for B2C companies. Like I'm not into B2C, but there's a more higher impact here, because in B2B we have multiple touch points where we get emails and get other pieces of information typically in the journey.
Mhm.
It's still hurting. It's still not awesome, uh, but Facebook B2C people who use Facebook as a primary channel for a B2C company, those are the ones that really feel this. Like those
Mhm.
are the ones that those are really hurt by this. So so yeah, it sucks. There's fortunately, like, and this is going to be one of those episodes where we have a like there's one thing that seems to be working, but that's about it. Like there's really not a lot to do. Like
Mhm.
I'm optimistic that some Google and Facebook will push back and find other ways to do these things, but it's hard, and there's a reason they
Mhm.
haven't done it yet. Like because trust me, their teams are working full time on this. Like since it was announced, right?
Absolutely.
Um, I think one of the proposals I wanted to bring up today is that you start looking more hardcore into server side tracking. Again, I'm no expert, but I know a bit about server side tracking. So essentially, it's just you place your own cookie, your own first place cookie, and instead of having, it's not really a cookie anymore. It's what we call an HTTP response. So, and it's between the browser and Google Tag Manager. Use Google Tag Manager to roll it out typically. And where with these first party this server side tracking, you can track it for a bit longer. I think it's up to 7 days. So and you host your own data. And my
Mhm.
suggestion is, if you do that way, which is something I would consider, then I would also consider having a CDP, like a customer data platform, like
Mhm.
Segment, typically the go-to one for a lot of people, a market leader and stuff. Also a great platform. So if you have a CDP plus server side tracking, that's my take on getting out in front of this.
Mhm.
However, that's also time consuming to do. Like even for a
And resource
technical
heavy.
person, yeah, it's
Mhm.
not. Like it's easy to implement segment day one, but it's not easy to implement segment on day 100
Yeah.
because suddenly there's a lot of places it has to go to and stuff. It's not. It's definitely doable. But my question to you, Jen, would be. Are you guys? Would you guys have you? Do you guys have a CDP? Do you guys, are you looking into server side tracking to solve this? Is this something you look into?
Yeah, so we have segment. We have again we have the luxury of having developer resources where we can have pixels and cookies on our own website. And again, just to emphasize for listeners, because first party data is fine.
Yeah.
That's data on your website, your customer audiences, anything that's on your site that's within your domain is not
Yes.
affected by this.
Yeah.
So I think, so that's something that, yes, if you have the resources, cookies on your website, of course, but also I think, I've always relied more heavily on first party data than anything else anyway, because it's the best data, it's the most quality data, and you know your audience the best. So, for me, for example, lookalike audiences have been by far the most effective audiences for my paid social campaigns. These are not impacted. And
Yeah.
that's something that people need to remember. So if you upload an existing customer list and make a lookalike of that, that is not affected by this at all. And these, it's kind of best practice, right, for B2B marketers like us to rely on first party data as opposed to these third party lists and things like that. What you're going to lose, and this is where Facebook is kind of freaking out, is they're losing the ability to show their attribution across different websites.
Yeah.
So if I click on a Facebook ad and then I go on a website and I buy the thing on the website, it's going to be very difficult because of if I opt out of the tracking, for Facebook to say that lead came from us. And that's why they're freaking out. Because that would be a third party website where I have gone to another website and did behavior there. But things that you can do to get around it, of course, like I said, uploading custom audiences, making lookalikes of those audiences. Geographic targeting is not going to be impacted either. So you can still do geographic locations down to within a kilometer, I think it is.
Yeah. So you still do a lot of these things, right?
So there's a lot of the stuff that a lot of B2B people are doing anyway that will not be affected. But what will be affected is your conversion window, which is going to be a problem for B2B. We don't necessarily make a sale overnight. So we're not going to really be able to see. I think they've gotten rid of the 28-day window. So anything, I think the most you can get is 7 days.
Yes.
So you can't see past 7 days where this person has come from.
No.
That's
if you have your own data. It's 1 day on some of these things now.
Correct.
So
yeah.
So it's even that's even worse, right? And I think what you're right on the lookalike on all the custom audiences. It's a good point. I also think it's important though to mention that what happens a lot here is also the algorithms get a lot worse, a lot worse. So in the past, you could just say Facebook. Actually, one of the common practices these days was to literally don't have a target audience. Just put your ads live and just say, oh, find whoever wants to buy this. That was actually an approach a lot of people would use, and that would be fine. I would be hesitant to try that these days. I would be a little bit worried about that because when the algorithms lose so much data, they become a lot worse, and we go back to having you and I be the controller of how Facebook operates. And we can. I'm not as good as Facebook at optimizing my campaign. So everyone will lose in this. Everyone who does digital marketing, it's just a matter of how much. And I agree with your using lookalikes and using custom audience. That is definitely what you need to be doing if you're not doing it already. But also be careful with leaving the algorithm would not be as good as it used to be. That's definitely 100% true. I recently saw, I think right when it came out, I think this was a crazy number. Haven't seen it since, so maybe it's a little bit different, but I have no reason to believe that. I think it was 97% said they didn't want to be tracked. So 3% was it's a huge drop off, right? You lose almost all your tracking. So it is it's a really big deal. It is a really big deal.
Yeah, and it will have an impact on. Facebook estimates about 50% of revenue is going to drop for certain businesses and things like that. I don't think it's that extreme, I guess, for B2B, because again, a lot of the stuff that we should be doing isn't going to be as impacted. But you're absolutely right. The algorithm will be a lot less reliable. So those lookalike audiences will probably be based more on demographics than behavior, for example. And that's not as good an indicator of whether someone's a good fit for you. One way around this, and this is something that you can do if you, again, know your ICP, one of the things we used to do at Plan Day anyway, before this came in, was our ICP were predominantly restaurants. So we would do
Yeah.
geo-targeting campaigns to areas that are heavily populated with restaurants, Covent Garden, Times Square, and that, sure, you'll run the risk of people who aren't in your target market seeing your ad, but that's one
Mm.
way around this. If you're going to an event, or if there's an event that's within your ICP, for
Yeah.
Dixa, we have like the CX Summit. If you can target within a kilometer, if it's at the XL Center in London, you can target that entire building with
Mm.
ads. And one of the things I did, I was actually quite proud of this campaign, but one of the things I did at Plan Day was there was a big restaurant vendor conference that we were present
Yeah.
at, and I did a geo-targeting campaign to that building, saying, why are you looking at your phone when you could be improving your scheduling? Visit stand H71 or whatever it was to learn
That's
more.
pretty smart. Yeah.
And and sales, when they came back, they were like, hey, we had a lot of people who saw your ad and thought it was really funny. And so you can
That's
do kind of
awesome.
fun things. It was really cool.
That's
so
really cool, really.
so I think this is a chance for you to be creative, and I think but I think we saw the introduction of GDPR. The tide is turning. Data is getting more and more valuable, which means it's becoming harder to get. So good marketers, we need to adapt. We can't fight it. We're not going to beat Apple. We're not going to beat Google. No. So let's adapt. Let's come up with new ways, because this is what's going to separate the good marketers from the lazy ones.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
And it brings back something we've talked about a lot in the past, and there's a lot of things going into this, but so there's two things I want to bring up here. So one of the things is that, first, let's talk B2B solutions. One of the things that's really beneficial for B2Bs, and always has been, is collecting emails. It's also good for B2C, but in B2B, it's a very common step. You ask for a demo, you kind of you have to put up your B2B email. It's not always the same in B2C. Like, yes, you have newsletters and stuff like that, but it's not the same prerequisite, let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. I think B2Cs have to adjust to that world, where they have to find a way to get information from people faster, whether it will be through the chatbots, whether it will be through lead ads, or whatever, collecting emails. And utilizing that's the future. And it goes a lot for B2Bs as well. If you're not collecting emails in B2B, then I don't know what you're doing, but that should be your main focus, because you can still do lead ads on Facebook and LinkedIn, and that will technically not be impacted by this. So that's very important.
Because it's first party. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Great point. So that's something you should be doing 100%. The thing, though, is, and we haven't actually brought that up, is that also now they're about to roll out, I can't remember the name of it, but email tracking also goes out the window. So it feels like we're getting hammered on all sides, but essentially in a minute, you won't be able to track stuff like open rates and what the click-through rates and all that stuff, right? On email, will email still be worth it? 100%, but you can be like, I send out 100,000 emails, and I can see we at least we sold something, but I can't see what happened to which emails and who actually bought and blah, blah, blah.
Let me ask you something about the email, because I've always taken open rates with a pinch of salt anyway, because an open rate is only calculated if an image is downloaded, right? Yes. But a lot of people don't download the images. There's image blockers, plain text emails. We have people who prefer a PDF. I know that sounds really old school, but when you have an ICP that work on unconventional hours, they like PDFs. So I've always taken open rates with a pinch of salt anyway. So again, I don't see this as being like, oh my God, everything's.
No, but I agree with you. Like, fundamentally, I agree with you. It is a bit of a vanity metric, right? But at the same time, it's also showing, like, it's data, and whenever something is taken away from us, we won't know how much we'll miss it until it's really gone. Like, and I feel the same. Of open rate is a really good example. But next time your boss comes and asks you, "Hey, we did this press release about an acquisition or a funding round. How many people read an email?" And you go, "I actually don't know. I have no clue."
And that's the thing that I think we need to end on. I think that's going to be the challenge, right? Is with attribution. We talked about this in our attribution episode of managers who maybe don't fully understand marketing. They want to see return on investment. They're like, how much did this impact, or what? That's going to be really hard to do now. It's going to be really hard to say, I spent $2,000 on Facebook and this is what it got me, because the tracking is going to mean that we won't know. And so we as marketers need to think, how can we show ROI if we can't track this data. And that's going to be the challenge. And I think that's the thing that's going to keep me up at night is when my manager says, what did you do with this money? I'm going to have a much hard, I mean, it was already hard to do without GDPR. It was already
now
difficult.
it's really hard, right?
It's
getting
really
harder.
hard.
And that's all. I totally share that. That's my biggest concern. And I think if we talk about the future and the winners of this, from my ending note as well, right? It's just, I'm not worried about the big brands. I'm not worried about Coca-Cola, McDonald's, whatever. Those guys will be fine. Like, I'm not worried about those guys whatsoever. What I am worried about is the companies like you and I, and the companies that are smaller than the companies we work for. Because those people don't have access to the resources, and especially the B2C ones. Because then they will be relying on not on something else. Like they had to find the internal resources to do this. They can't rely on the platforms. And truth be told, if you go to an agency, yes, an agency will be good, but the agency itself will have a hard time proving what they're doing. So those are the guys with less resources. Those are the ones that will hurt. And that is what that's actually what pisses me off the most from Apple's side. Because Apple should be protecting the small business owners. And this is doing exactly the opposite of that. So on that note, don't worry, the sky is not falling, but it's definitely not a good day for tracking. It's a good day for branding, though. Branding. Okay. See you guys. Take care.
Leave it at that. Thanks so much. See you next time.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.